Well, hello everybody. Welcome to Virtual Thursdays Dire Literary Series, and today my guest is Hosho McCreesh. Let me check out and show you some of Hosho's website. And before I even start, I'm totally mesmerized by Hosho's website. But looking at some of his other work and his multi artist abilities, it doesn't surprise me. But this is not even the homepage. There's all these moving pieces. I mean, I compare my website was done by the Fred Flintstone was the web designer, and this one is just super cool. You know, have a look around, and what I'm finding too is there's no bio in here, and we're gonna talk about that as well. But like, you can find poetry, fiction. So it's the work. It's not the bio. It's the work that speaks. There's there's paintings. There's collages, visual bibliography. There are things to watch. There's animated stuff. There's films. There's podcasts to listen to. Contact bio. There it is. Um, but the bio is one sentence. He's currently writing, painting, and making stuff in the gypsum and caliche badlands of the American Southwest. His work has appeared widely in print, audio, and online. Rubber stamp that, MFer, and that does not do this gentleman justice. But he's multi-talented, and I'm going to turn it over to him, Hosho McCreesh.
Uh, Thanks, Tim. Hello, everyone. I'm happy to be here. Um, I guess maybe we jump right into reading some poems out of this new book of mine. Uh, this book is different than a lot of my other stuff. It's one of the things I kind of I don't know if it's smart or dumb, but I do it, whatever it is. I'm constantly pushing myself, trying to do different kinds of work, write different kinds of things, make different kind of stuff. And so this book sort of described as haiku-like work. A lot of the journals that are very strict about haiku, this stuff doesn't necessarily work within their framework, but still it's a form that I really like. Short poems in particular, I really like, and I think of this book kind of as a love note to New Mexico, to the desert Southwest, where I've lived basically my whole life. And so yeah, what I'll do they're haiku-like Japanese breath poems, so they're quite short. So I've actually flagged about 10 of them to read, and during the editing process, I sort of found these threads that existed in the book that were unplanned, but they were still great to find there. And so I'll be, this thread I've got in mind to read today has to do kind of with Zen-like stuff, um, sort of like Zen koans, other sort of uh, poems that feel like they had a kind of a Zen, I don't know, a soul to them. And so I'll focus on those. The rest of the book is largely centered around the kind of natural beauty of the desert Southwest, and also the kind of the hard scrabble life you have to carve out in places where uh, the flowers and trees and plants like sometimes have to struggle to make it. So um, with all that preamble, I'll jump in. None of the poems have titles; they're all just numbered. So I'll just read the number in the poems, starting with number 11. The ancient and the dead, immigrant and indigenous alike, their scream is the silent desert at 4 a.m. Mind boggling to think this is what they'll eventually find when they finally dig us up. 54. Muddy ditch water and dimples beneath water spiders' feet. Tenuous, this life. 61. Late spring frost. The wrought blue limbs clustered with plum buds, and all of us pretending It'll be okay. '87. Gray raindrops still clinging, quivering on wet elm branches, storm over an hour gone, and like most things, we're still convinced that what was, somehow, still matters. '90. Still under the shade of the dead weeping willow, the dead Japanese maple, both long ago chopped and burned. Ah, our own Bodhi tree to sit under. '92. Disgusted, vengeful, and cruel, a heavy February breath smolders up from cold, cupped hands. And once again, my compassion remains incomplete. '99. A dead sparrow, sad for everything except the maggots. 113. Late September and dusk, and even after spending every goddamn moment with ourselves, we're somehow still a mystery. Jesus, what a tragic and wonderful waste of time. 122. Lonesome, occasional pop from a dying fire, and then there's me, one step closer to conquered. And last but not least, 135. Snowflakes, pointlessly into hot springs. Ah, there's that suffering Buddha told us about.
All right. Interesting stuff, and I have a lot of questions about that. First of all, like when you do a reading like in front of a lot of people because your poems are so short, do you ask them not to applaud between the pieces?
You know what? I don't do a whole lot of readings, like in-person readings. Maybe that's why I'm still very underground and virtually unknown. Unlike unlike your last guest, Martone, who basically knew everybody, knows everyone, has met everyone. I'm like the opposite. I know no one. I've met no one. I've done nothing. Just kind of bummed around in the small press for 25 years or so. Um, I I've personally I dislike the sort of clapping between poems thing. It feels very I don't know, like it's born of like the like a bad movie about the Beat Generation and snapping and berets and things. I don't necessarily care for that stuff, but of course, if someone wants to, if they're so moved by a piece that they clap, I guess that's not the end of the world.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I always find that the clapping starts, and then by the end of the set, they're just kind of, oh, I guess it's time to clap now. What about a gasp? In other words, like your poem ends and the audience lets out a sigh or a gasp. Is that
Yeah.
acceptable?
I guess I think the thing that's really unacceptable to me is when you get a hmm. That stuff I don't like at all.
You introduced your work tonight as you're pushing onto different things. So as an artist, why push? Why push to something new in your writing?
Uh, that's a good question. I don't know if I don't know where it comes from. I would say that a lot of artists that I really admire, that's a thing that they always did, and so maybe it's a sincere form of flattery to want to be kind of like artists that constantly pushed. I like people like Miles Davis and stuff who just he just never stopped trying to do something new. And then I also think it for you as a creator, it engages you in a completely different way and place when you paint yourself into a corner and you're doing stuff that you're like unaccustomed to doing and maybe not even comfortable with. I think that's good stuff can come from it, as long as you don't just like spit it out and be done with it. Like, do it, suffer through the newness of things, and then go back with your sort of best editing eyes and see if there's something still there. I guess that's the approach that I've kind of always taken. And again, I couldn't say with any degree of certainty why it's been that way. It just always has.
Do you get tired of your themes? In other words, say you write a poem and you're like, "Oh, here we go again." Is that sort of a motivation to go different places? Or?
You know, I think that's probably that's a like a piece of it. I remember, um, gosh, more than a decade or so ago by now, a lot of the stuff I was writing poems that had really long, like ginormous lyrical kind of titles, and then sometimes the poem itself was shorter than the title, and it got to be kind of a joke, like, here's the guy with the big long titles, and so yeah, I think maybe when if you feel like you're becoming a kind of lousy sketch of your former self, then you should consider doing something else or trying something else. At least to my way of thinking, anyways. Again, who knows if I'm right about anything?
Yeah, Robert has a question. Are the themes that are unique, what are the themes that are unique to the Southwest, and which ones do you attack?
Hmm. Good question. I'm not sure if, well, I mean, certainly a thing that's pretty unique to the American Southwest, or any place that's where water is such a commodity, is sort of scarcity and drought. Um, the kind of the way water is such a valuable thing, um, for plants, for animals, for people. That's very different than other places in the country where water is abundant. Um, I think as a result of that, a lot of the plant life that is featured in the new book is the kind of stuff that doesn't necessarily grow everywhere. Um, some desert plants actually can't make it in places that have a lot more abundant water, and so um, that's a really kind of magical thing for me. Um, I really love, if you ever get a chance to see a desert right before it's rained and then right after it's rained, like like you put a camera in one place and you take a picture before the storm and after the storm, you won't even recognize like that it's the same photo, that it's the same stuff. Plants right after it rains in the desert look almost in a surreal sort of way different than they did before, and the colors, like the colors of the desert, really come to life right after a rain. And so I think that's the thing that's very unique to arid regions. As to what I attack, I'm not sure if you mean like attack as things that are not around here, or anyways, I don't understand that portion of the question. I'm happy to try to understand it if there's
No, I
uh,
think you answered it with what your previous comment there. But one thing with that answer, you talked a lot about the nature in your
mhm.
area, and that the traditional Japanese haiku form is all about beauty and nature. Is that why you ended up with haiku-like poems with this particular book?
I wouldn't say that that's the reason why. I think that I've always felt um, that there is to me, it's always seemed like a very obvious connection between um, this sort of like Eastern or Japanese kind of aesthetic when it comes to the appreciation of nature. And it's always seemed obvious to me as a thing that New Mexico would share uh, with Japan, and with that kind of writing. As a matter of fact, I'm not the only one in the world that thinks this. There's a really amazing spa up in Santa Fe. It's basically designed like a Japanese onsen. It's up in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, right near the ski area in Santa Fe. And if you ever have a chance to visit it, I strongly recommend it. It feels like you walk straight into Japan. They've done a lot of really traditional construction and stuff over there. And I remember the first time, it's called 10,000 Waves. And the first time that I saw it, I was like, exactly, they get it. They know what I'm talking about. And so it's a thing that I've really always felt. It's so obvious to me, I almost can't describe why, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Robert's other question. There's a poetry movement, especially in American poetry, that you write in the form, yet you do not write in the form. In other words, like the reduction of the form, like you write a sonnet that doesn't have to rhyme, for example. What's your response to form poetry, the reduction of forms?
So I think, I mean, obviously, I think everybody's approach to creativity, whatever their personal approach is, like it's fine. Like you work really hard to do your very best at it, and hopefully you find some success doing it. I think forms, maybe this is kind of like an American cultural kind of mindset thing, but we can be kind of difficult to get along with because we don't like to follow rules. We don't like to be told what to do. We like to do our own thing and make our own way. So maybe it's a kind of a cultural thing, a kind of pushback against forms. I think that there's probably value in all of it. I think there's value in learning as much as you can about forms. Trying to create stuff within the framework is a cool kind of constriction, but I think also just giving yourself permission to do what feels right and do what works for you. At the end of the day, is what's going to be, it's going to make your work yours, as opposed to, I don't know, like a poor imitation of somebody else's work or somebody else's aesthetic.
And so you open your very incredible web page, and the first thing you read is like artist, painter, drunk poet. So why would you identify as a drunk poet? In other words, I mean, I used to identify as a drunk poet, but then I realized I was a drunk social worker, I was a drunk husband, I was a drunk driver,
Drunk
for example.
everything.
Yeah. So why identify as such?
I think that was kind of it. It came from years ago. This is right after the writing all of the poems with the really long titles. The next thing I did with the book is I wrote a giant book of poems about every single time I could remember being drunk, and none of the poems had titles, as a sort of pushback to the long title thing. It's called A Deep and Gorgeous Thirst, and I think just from it's a big fat kind of magnum opus kind of book. And so I think, I didn't see, I don't know, no one else is admitting to or calling themselves a drunk poet. So I'm like, well,
Anymore.
I guess I'll be that then. That's cool. And certainly I don't drink anymore like I used to. Like you can't do that as you get older. You just don't recover the same way. But yeah, I liked to drink when I was younger. I'm still not afraid of a drink every now and again now that I'm much older. But yeah, I guess it's just a thing to call yourself that no one else is. Maybe, I don't know.
Let me show people some of your work, because
Sure.
I mean, here's some watercolors. This is all on Hosho McCreesh.com website. So here's some watercolors. All right. Here is some oil paintings. And as I scroll by there, I can't help to notice Mr. Charles Bukowski, probably A1 drunk poet. And I think Bukowski gets a bad rap, but I think he probably has turned more people into poets than anybody else, any other poet. So what is how do you feel when people like diss Charles Bukowski?
Um, I, I mean, I'm a huge fan of Bukowski. Very obviously, I'm a huge fan of him. I think that it's sort of, it ebbs and flows. Like sometimes the feedback about his work is that he was doing really really amazing things, giving voices, poetic voices where they hadn't existed at least in terms of America, anyways, hadn't really existed before. Um, and there are parts of his work that, because of shifts in culture and admittedly, uh, when it comes to things that we should move forward as people, some of his stuff hasn't aged as well. But to me, he's a really really important figure. Um, it's very much like short poems, actually, to write anything and to make it look so easy that everyone thinks that they can do that they look at it and they think, oh my God, that's so easy, I could do that. To write that well all the time is it's a real talent and a real skill. And I agree with you. I think he's made far more poets than what Shakespeare ever did, or uh, I think, and I think that's great. I mean, I think that the world is a much better place if everyone was able and encouraged to indulge whatever artistic sensibilities they may have had. I mean, we start off as kids and we don't have any trouble being creative, and then somewhere along the way we abandon it, or it gets beat out of us, or laughed out of us, or whatever. And I think humans in general, I mean, we're not necessarily as smart as we think we are. So much of us are boring throughout the millennia, just schlepping through boring old lives. And I think there's a reason that early early cave folks painted on cave walls. Like there's something there, be it trying to like leave a record that you were here and you existed, or that it feeds some sort of deeper creative need. But I think humans would do better if everyone was creative and encouraged to be. So,
Yeah. I always felt that Bukowski was the Walt Whitman of his time. And I
mm,
also feel that what you're talking about, cave and cave dwellings and cave drawings and even poetry back in the 60s. I mean, before social media, like that is like cave drawings are the TikTok of its time, pretty much.
sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like I mean, maybe it's born from a deep human need to want to be seen, and like maybe a worse human need to want to be appreciated, or
Yeah.
celebrated, or whatever. Um, but yeah, like there's certainly something primal in us that, and especially as kids, like we all start off with it. Who knows where it goes as we grow up? Um, but like doing things, playing, being creative, it all comes naturally to kids. And for some reason, when we grow up as adults, we lose track of that, and
Yeah.
that's too bad.
And I thought also Bukowski, besides what you mentioned, he can do it, I can do it. He can, but like, there's also a part of it too that like, if you're a young poet and you're male, culture. I mean, back when I was younger, it'd be like, you're just a pussy. And Bukowski sort of gave us permission to not write weakly as a weak,
Hmm.
emotional man.
Hmm. No, I agree with that. And in terms of, I mean, even going back to like Hemingway, these kinds of like really macho-y kinds of writers
Carver
that
too.
yeah, yeah. I mean, yes, there's a whole kind of um, in American writing. There's a whole uh, big movement that uh, yeah, at some point started to be a thing that there was backlash against. And it's culturally, you can understand the backlash, like folks that haven't had uh, adequate access to have their voices heard. It's understandable that there's like we're tired of listening to old white guys. Like, I mean, I totally and completely get that. But if you're a young white guy, like you're saying, you're trying to figure out who you want to be creatively. It makes sense that you're going to look to things that are similar to your experience. Um, and yeah, I mean, I think that it's a good cultural change that it's easier to find more voices, and that more voices are being listened to. um, Women, voices of color. This is tremendously important stuff, because at the end result of all of it is that we learn we're just humans. We're all humans together, and until someone has had the opportunity to kind of say their piece, that they should fight for the opportunity to say it, and I'm happy to stay out of the way if I can. So
So yeah, so we heard some wonderful poems from Psalms from the Badlands. We scroll down to your very talented artwork. So let's play a game here. All right.
okay.
You have one attempt to write a poem, paint a picture, do a collage, and it's juried, so it's voted upon. And if you don't receive like 50% or say 80% approval rating, they will kill you. So which form do you reach for?
Ah, so I mean, what do I think I'm best at? Well, maybe the question is, what sort of day
Really?
am I
Oh,
having?
come on! My game was so much more fun than what was what am I best at?
For me, it would matter what sort of day I'm having, because if it's a lousy day, maybe I wouldn't mind getting killed. Uh, I think ah, I really like. There's a sense of immediacy to your question that I feel like it's a thing that needs to be done kind of fast, and so as part of my answer, I'm going to say I tend to make collage pretty fast, and I really like making collage. Um, and so I guess if immediacy was an issue, I would try to make a collage as fast as I could. Um, but yeah, no. How do you pick between all your kids, right?
Yeah, I mean, you might have a favorite, but you're not going to really admit that.
I have a favorite because I only
Especially,
have one.
especially. So also, we were kind of talking before this is happening about, we're both, worked with the small press, and we talked about small press journals that don't exist. Which ones do you miss the most? Which were your favorites that no longer exist? They may not even have a trace left.
Yeah, yeah. So there was a magazine. We were also talking about like magazines that you try and never get into. One of
Yeah.
those magazines for me was Nerve Cowboy, which was a really great magazine. I think they were out of Texas, and I think that they are done. I think they've stopped. Um, there is the Lilliput Review, which was like really short poems stuff uh, out of I think it was in Pennsylvania, um, and I think they are no longer any doing anything. And one of my favorites, they only had a couple of issues, was Blue Monk, um, out of New Orleans. Those were all magazines that I really looked forward to getting. Back then when you're like just starting out and you don't have any money, it's like submitting to magazines back then when you didn't have two nickels to rub together. It was yeah, you really had to want it. At least I did. I really had to want to spend the few bucks I had on a yearly subscription or issues of some of those. And yeah, I would always try to get those if I had a little extra scratch.
Which ones are that exist now are very welcoming to your work? In other words, like, there's a certain percentage of acceptance rejection. Which
Uh,
magazines do you have high acceptance rates at these days?
um, I don't have the same kind of sort of drive to submit that I did before. I think I've transitioned a lot of my like submitting energy into like making stuff, like making books, like doing whatever artistically. And so I don't submit a whole lot anymore. But what I do try to submit to is like all the magazines that I see having open submissions that I really admire. And some of my favorites, X-Ray Book Company is one of my favorites. Whenever they're doing anything, they do magazine, but they also do other other sort of printed things every now and again. So I'll always submit to them if I see they've got an open call. And then over in the UK, there is Viper's Tongue Quarterly and Tangerine Press. They put out really beautiful handmade stuff, and so I'm always struggling to try to get into places like that. I'm try to get my very best work together and send it to them whenever when they've got open submissions. So yeah, those are some.
All right, Hosho McCreesh, thank you so much. And here's what the book looks like. It came out in early It came out in early August, so it's fresh off the press. Check it out. It's a beautiful book. Go to his website, HoshoMcCreesh.com. There's some really wonderful and beautiful. God, you can get lost in that website. I've never gone down a rabbit hole so thick on a single website in my life. It's just wonderful stuff. And you know, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I'm glad we both know Ben.
Ben Tanzer, who is
Yep.
on our show, and anyone that's watching the stream, thank you for watching the streaming version of this. And we're going to cut you off now. But if you'd like to come into the room and read at the open mic, just use the Zoom link that's posted in the event invitation, also on Hasho's site, and also in the Facebook group. So thanks very much for watching on the stream.